Hey there.
Hello. So this is Danielle Wiley from Sway Group, and I am here with Michael Lambie from CreatorIQ. And we are very excited to have this conversation that actually started when we saw each other live in person. What was that, a month? I keep saying
Yeah.
times with no meaning.
And the before, yeah, in the after
It
times.
wasn't in the before times, but yeah. So I just this summer relocated from the Bay Area to Michigan to Ann Arbor, and Michael relocated right before COVID, right?
Yep, that's right. A little over 2 years here. When in California for 15 before that, so it's nice
Yeah.
to have some seasons and weather.
Yes, a lot of weather. We had our first snow on Sunday. It was very exciting. So yeah, so we are both here in the Detroit area, and we were going to try to meet in person. We'll have to do that next time, but had some COVID scares, so we are all healthy, and a crisis was averted, but we thought this would be safer. So we wanted to talk about data integrity. So again, I was speaking at a conference in Detroit a few weeks ago, and someone in the audience asked for I was speaking, and someone asked for my recommendation for a influencer marketing platform. So Michael was sitting in the front row, and I love CreatorIQ anyway, but I of course said CreatorIQ, but then I said, but even if you want to look at some other options, if you want to talk to some other folks, one of the things that I think is really important is to really do a deep dive and do some digging and ask a lot of hard questions about data integrity. So you and I started talking about that a little bit afterwards, and we thought we would continue it with a live audience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a topic that speaks close to my heart because, in the early days of, especially in influencer marketing, it was legitimizing the value of the metrics and the ability for creators to be influential for brands on all sorts of measures. But it was a lot harder to get good data in the early days, and things have improved. So you want to make sure that you're applying some best techniques there, and whether you're using a tool or pulling it yourself. There's a lot of things to consider, which I imagine we'll talk about today.
Yeah, yeah. So we should maybe back up. I'm a terrible Oprah. Why don't you explain what you do at CreatorIQ and your role? You've been there. You were the first employee, I learned recently, but why don't you explain just a little bit about what you do, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm the head of global measurement and insights. It's a data-centric role, thinking about how we pull data from social platforms through their APIs, how we evaluate and use third-party tools for additional data and insights, how we store the data, how our clients are able to use it, what's available through APIs, what metrics they're allowed to use, and the labels they're allowed to use for them. Before that, I was the head of product for a few years, for the first 4 years at CreatorIQ, and I worked in measurement and marketing research at Nielsen for about 10 years, doing all sorts of different things across 7 business units, and managed to fit in 2 years at 20th Century Fox on their international theatrical team on the media department.
So you're legit, and we can trust what you have to say.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hope so. Well, I try my best.
So to your point, we get a lot more data now than we used to. I mean, when we started Sway over 10 years ago, I remember moments where we were counting comments with like a pencil eraser on the screen, asking then it was bloggers to send us screenshots of Google Analytics. Things have gotten a lot more complex and fine-tuned and granular, and we now have more data than we know what to do with. So, I mean, we kind of look at the data from 2 perspectives. One, who is seeing the content? So how do we analyze the reach and the demographics of the influencers so we can decide who to hire and make sure that we're getting content in front of the right eyeballs? And then once the content goes live, looking to see how well it performed, what resonated, what engaged, and gathering all of those numbers. So we kind of look at it on the front end and then on the back end. So it's super important from start to finish from our perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think anyone who had the pain of having to collect these metrics manually certainly appreciates any efficiencies that they're able to make using the APIs from the platform, which effectively are manifested in many of the tools that you see today, whether it's CreatorIQ or any other number of tools. And something, yeah, especially for us in the early days, the APIs were a little limited on what data they could provide, and now they provide a lot of data. And with that comes a lot of privacy issues around what kind of data you're allowed to use. So what we've seen over the last few years too is more and more of an importance for our clients to have their creators authenticate their accounts, which gives them access to first-party audience data, reach and impressions on most platforms. On Instagram, it gives you the Instagram stories. And we like to get that, firsthand, because it's, I think there's certainly a few times over the years we've seen people kind of fudge their numbers, or maybe embellish them a little bit in terms of saying how many impressions they might get on a post, or some of the metrics are a little harder to see, or even saying what type of audience they have. So we like to get that all first party directly through the platforms, and to get the permission from the creators, because I think especially platforms like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter have been really clamping down on privacy. And the more time goes on, the more they're requiring explicit permission to get these types of metrics.
Yeah. So we talked about this before. You guys have been kind of surprised by how many of our creators, so in our network, we have over 30,000 creators, and we actually require them to authenticate before working with us so that we can have the most accurate data.
Yeah.
From I guess I'll toot my own horn.
Yeah.
You told us that that's unusual to require that and to have so many who are authenticated.
Yeah, and it is. You're certainly the leader in getting people onboarded and coaching that into the ecosystem. At the end of the day, the whole industry wins, because now many other brands and agencies are following your suit and making that a best practice now. And I would argue, if I was a brand or an agency running a practice, I would do everything I can to ensure that with any influencer, no matter how big or small they are. Even the biggest ones in the game will do it now, because it's in many ways it saves some time and energy of trying to do screenshots of metrics or private metrics, or having, not necessarily that they have to do it themselves, maybe their agent or manager has to do them, or their assistants. But yeah, it's a great best practice, and it's awesome, because it's a good best practice. We're going to get more standards, a way to collect this, even things now like hiding dislikes on YouTube, hiding likes and comments on Instagram posts. Whether an influencer or creator chooses to do that or not, it's great to know what the numbers are if you're paying them to to make content for your brand or business.
It was nice on our end to be able to tell our clients, like, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter if they hide their likes. Like, we got it. We can see all of it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
So sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if the general public realizes how many likes were there, right? As long as the the client at the end of the day has an idea of how well it's working out.
Yeah. So one of the, as we were vetting different platforms and just kind of as we talked to other folks, I want to talk about the data integrity of the demographics that we look at before we do a program. So we do a ton of programs that are geo-targeted. So like a store opening in a specific zip code, and they want to make sure that they're reaching only people within a 20-mile radius, or chicken that's only sold in California, or whatever it might be. We seem to get all of those programs. So it's very, very important to make sure that we are, certainly we can hit a lot of people specifically with paid amplification, but we also want to make sure that we're reaching organically a demographic that makes sense, whether it's gender, location, age, all of that. So as we were looking at other platforms, one of the things we're noticing is that many, many platforms are using scrape data to provide those demographics. And as we were kind of testing the validity of that, we would put in influencers folks who work for us on our team who happen to be influencers on the side as a side hustle. And we would put in their data to test the scrape data And apparently we have people working for us who live in Brazil and have followers all over the world. And like, it was completely, we were comparing this to what they're able to see on the back end, and then also to what, we've seen in, like, comparing, looking at everything all side by side. And it's always wildly inaccurate when you're looking at scraped data.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy to me that brands are spending so much money with influencers with like a completely inaccurate idea of what the demographics of the followers are.
Yeah, that's a great point. It really brings up, at the end of the day, the social platform really has to speak as the source of truth, understanding that they have the user data, they know where, the IP addresses and where people are logging in from and what their profile says, and ultimately what their followers' profile data says. So they know better than anyone. And it's hard to contest that a social media platform would not be the source of truth. If you were to try to audit them somehow, I think it would be a very large uphill battle to make that claim. So it's important. I know one of the things you do, you really pioneer nano and micro influencers, and especially when you're talking about these targeted local campaigns, it's really important to know that you're not throwing away audience data because you're using someone who's really large and maybe 80% of their audience is outside of your target area. And we see, as we compare the organic influencer content strategy against a paid media strategy, and we think certainly now with boosting, which is quite mature, it allows us to supplement and is seen as more of a best practice. It's really nice to know you're not throwing away organic impressions to an audience that won't ultimately watch it. Whereas in paid media, you can be quite efficient with your targeting with an influencer. It's good to have that information. Otherwise, you could be paying someone with 1 million followers who gets 500,000 views. You could be paying them a ton of money and they're only delivering 20,000 views to your target audience, whether it's by geography or their, consumer segment. But ultimately, the more the better bargaining chip you have to, to spend the money correctly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like with the way Zuckerberg has, I always assume he's doing all this personally to me, but like the way the algorithms have now been created, like it's no secret that the vast majority of impressions are generated from paid. That said, organic, especially if you're using some of the larger creators, it's still a big chunk of change. It's still a lot of people, and to throw it out the window because you don't know who you're getting is crazy. And I think it also kind of takes away from the authenticity of the content. So if you are, I keep talking about geolocation. So certainly if you're talking about a store opening in a certain zip code, you want the person to live there so that it's authentic. But it could be, I don't know, like I'm trying to think, something that's a very age specific, like, right? Like if you're talking about a product that's for women over 45 and the audience is all 18 to 24-year-olds.
Yeah, right. All sorts of life stages, right? Like, that you want to target people who are, going engaged or going to be married, which are cool targets you can do. Or just various life stages, parents or, people who need certain services or that are only available based on age limits and whatnot. And certainly the drinking rules, right? For, being careful around younger audiences around, with the LDA compliance for anyone who's in alcoholic beverages and all sorts of things. So it's the more data, the better, and having the confidence that it comes from the source of truth. And certainly there's some other things we look at when we talk about creator integrity and what is that. The New York Times really blew the lid open and made quite the tizzy for a lot of people in our space when they came out with their massive follower fraud article, maybe 2 years and maybe 3 years ago. And everyone's rushing to say, oh, they found like 20 people who had bots and are paying for their followers. And at the end of the day, CreatorIQ, we don't want to say we have a fraud solution in the sense that we're going to identify how much of someone's account is fraud. But what we talk about is creator integrity, and we want to know more about the active audience or the target audience, the audience that matches the brand you're targeting for, the types of people. Understanding that the same things that make someone fraudulent also make them poor influencers. So if they have weird spikes in their follower growth that aren't authentic, if they have poor engagement rates or impression rates, even if they're not bought or paid for or acquired fraudulently, you probably don't want to work with them anyway. So we try to flag stuff like that. Or, if you're focusing even just at a country level, you're focusing on creators in the United States. And what do you know? This person has 80% of their audience in Brazil and the Philippines. And you're like, wow, that's pretty weird for someone who grew up in New Jersey, who only speaks English and doesn't really travel to those countries. But certainly there are always exceptions, and we've seen some funny ones over the years. But yeah, these are all things that we need to know so that we don't perpetuate fraud. I think the platforms themselves, probably take a lot of heat for the idea of fraud, and they can only do so much to know. But at the end of the day, I say a fraudulent follower is the same as a follower who isn't logging on to social media anymore, or rarely checks it, or maybe passed away, or got locked out of their account forever. So we focus on what we say the active audiences, or the people who show up.
I think that's smart, because a lot of the platforms also don't make it very easy to clean up your following, and a lot of fake followers. There are bots that will follow your account when like you follow Nicki Minaj, and suddenly the next day you have 30 to 50 followers who just it's a bot who follows everyone who follows Nicki Minaj, or whatever it might be. And there's no, especially as you get bigger and bigger, to go through your following manually to weed out anything that doesn't look right. Like, it's not viable. It's not sustainable. So I think it's smart to look at that active, engaged audience.
Yeah, it's funny because the social platforms really have very little incentive to allow you to prune your followers. But you have they have the purges every now and then, these kind of cultural purges where go in and just unfollow people, or only talk to your best friends, or all these things you see people go through. But it's easy to say I'm sick of this person, I'm annoyed, I want to mute them for a week, or block them, or just unfollow them. But it's really hard to say, out of my, let's say you have 1,000, even just 1,000 followers, an influencer who has tens or hundreds or millions has a much bigger problem. But even if I have 1,000 followers, I'm like, you know what? I really need to get rid of 200 of my followers today. I'm just going to go through the list of people who are following me and just block them all. That's very tedious. And also, what criteria am I going to use to do that? So it's really tricky. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone attack that problem, but it's funny.
One day, next business idea. So is there anything we're missing? We talked a ton about the demographic stuff. You talked a lot about the metrics that are available after the measurement metrics that are available about a specific campaign through the API, which you can't get any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, the social platforms also, again, don't always make every important metric available through their API. So some things still have to be manual, unfortunately. And I think what we've seen in the last year or two is the biggest glaring one would be the swipe up on Instagram stories. What is the swipe up or the click, which is now the sticker tap link click, I believe is what it's called. So it's cool that they're changing the format, I suppose. It's probably the sticker makes it more apparent to the user, or the casual user anyway. And but it's that's a major metric. Let's do that. There's some other fun things you can do too by adding, if you're doing links, and adding query parameters to do some more better attribution models and other things like that. But I think that probably goes a little bit outside the scope of, thinking about audience integrity. But certainly, anything measurement is always interesting to me.
Yeah. My personal favorite has been seeing the save on Instagram. I love it, especially for food campaigns. Like when we're working on a campaign for a specific ingredient and a creator does a recipe. That piece of data is so important, to see all the people saving it and knowing that there's that purchase intent right there.
It is. It's really funny. It's purchase intent, and it's also in some cases it can also be a good indicator for evergreen content too. So if your holiday recipe for your product is very good this year, it might be good to think about next year, or at least it gives you some clues as to what content is more savable or memorable. But it's a little power metric, and it's such a fun one because it
Yeah.
really was under the radar for a while, and I think they let that go through the API, which is great. But yeah, it's a funny world of metrics out there, and
Yep.
the platforms are always mixing things up, and we always try to keep up with them. Looking at TikTok right now is certainly the hot topic for the past year or two as well, as they've been rolling out their API. Is an exciting place for us to be, and yeah, who knows what's next.
Yeah. Well, I want to personally thank you because we had built our own dashboard back in the 2012, 2013, and we're trying to stay on top of all the APIs on our own. And I always joke that much as I'd love to be a technology company from a valuation perspective, I am very much not.
Yeah.
CreatorIQ is not a technology company. We are an agency, and it is great to partner with technology companies like CreatorIQ because you help us do a better job.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your insight and feedback to us as well, helping to keep us smarter on our toes. And, as we don't really interface at all with creators, you're our voice of creators as well, which is really important when you think about how you were able to get so many to adopt the best practice of linking and authenticating their accounts. But certainly at the end of the day, I mean, it's one thing in the startup world in general, people talk about automating all the things you don't like to do. And even if you are an influencer and a technology company, it's funny how much maintaining the social media platforms applications are a pain in the butt, and no one wants to. Not that it's impossible or a feat to get one up and running, but the maintenance and the rules and the changes and all the hoops you have to jump through on and on.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a big deal. So we have some people just enjoy that they don't have to do that anymore with us, which I get a kick out of.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, and we will have to do this again, and we will for sure do it in person.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Very nice to see other humans.
Oh, humanity. I miss it. Let's do it.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we will talk soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Thanks for having me. It was very enjoyable.
Bye.
Bye.